97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
He's in! Touchdown!
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
At Football at 4, Andrew DiCecco, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Plenty of NFL to get into. And Eagles as well. We'll get into plenty of different topics today on the Football at 4. As we typically do in the offseason here, we will scan the NFL landscape. There's so much intrigue about what's next for the NFL. You know, we talked a lot today regarding the NBA and baseball getting ready. It feels like, you know, I was talking about this earlier. You know, as much as we're excited, these sports are still about a month away from actual game action. So keep that in mind. But first, I want to bring Andrew in and get some thoughts on the big NFL stories, including, Andrew, Cam Newton heading to the Patriots. Now, this was the big story on Sunday, and then all of a sudden, you know, the dust has settled, and Cam Newton gets a pretty reasonable deal to go to the New England Patriots. A lot of people said that would be the spot. Then they kind of tried to sell us on Stidham that, oh, nope, he was the guy. But your take on Newton's fit with the New England Patriots?
Well, I love the fit, and this is something that Seth Joyner and I spoke about over 2 months ago, thinking that this was the logical spot for him to land, because really they're the only team that really had a glaring need at the quarterback position. I wasn't fully sold on Jarrett Stidham. I'm not sure that New England was fully sold on Jarrett Stidham, but I mean, he's an interesting player, so he's going to be a wild card somewhat, because he's going to have to get it. He has a very minimal time to get used to Josh McDaniels' offensive system. But when the New England offense is it's perceived to be maligned, but it's really not that bad when you really look at what he had to work with in Carolina. New England has Julian Edelman, Mohamed Sanu. You have N'Keal Harry, who you drafted in the first round. They drafted a tight end from UCLA, Devin Asiasi, who's an athletic player. You have Yadni Cages, who's an offensive tackle who they drafted in the third round from West Virginia last season. He might be ready to start and step up and take the right tackle job from Marcus Cannon. When you really look at what he had in Carolina, he had, Devin Funchess, he had Jericho Cotchery, Philly Brown. He did have Greg Olsen, but, the running backs were Jonathan Stewart and Fozzie Whitaker. So he does have, and he was able to take those guys to the Super Bowl. So he does have considerable weapons to work with in New England, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people out there. He took a lot of hits over the last couple of years, but this was the MVP of the league not too long ago. He led them to 15-1, the Panthers. Now, does this signing change New England's fortunes? In other words, did you think they were a possible playoff miss? And does this make them a playoff team? Does this make them a Super Bowl contender? What exactly is the impact of this deal?
Well, I don't want to put a label on it just yet. I think that Cam Newton, if healthy, he makes them a playoff team. But I'm not necessarily sure that they're currently better than the Buffalo Bills, who has an elite defense and a quarterback in Josh Allen who's very much ascending, and they've added weapons and Stephon Diggs there. So it's kind of hard for me to have New England leapfrog the Buffalo Bills just based off of this signing. Cam Newton, he is healthy. On March 24th, the Carolina Panthers and his agency conducted a physical for his shoulder and his foot, which everything checked out well. But now it's going to be, can he prove to be durable for an entire season? How quickly can he get up to speed with New England's offense and the different concepts that they try to do there? But, he definitely makes them a playoff team without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they end up using him. Is he definitively the starter? I mean, does Stidham get a shot? You got Hoyer there as well, who knows the system. It certainly added some intrigue to that Patriots team that I think was already there, but this puts it at another level, no question.
Oh, yeah, certainly. And you mentioned it, Jarrett Stidham, let's not rule him out completely just yet. He's been in the system for a year. They liked him to a degree, maybe not enough. They didn't like him enough where they felt comfortable not having him, be really challenged by anybody. this summer. But I mean, he's been in the system for a year, and he's going to have the opportunity to really seize this position as Cam Newton tries to really get his legs under him and get back into a huddle and run things. So let's not rule out Jarrett Stidham. There's a lot that has to kind of take place in order to see how this pans out. But, obviously Cam's the front runner.
Yeah, because, I mean, they were trying to sell Stidham as almost, I don't want to say Tom Brady-like, but, hey, he was a late pick, and people aren't giving him credit, and wait till you see what this guy brings to the table. Right? Didn't it kind of have, like, that was the way they were kind of pitching it?
Yeah, and that's kind of New England speak. They're going to do that for all their guys, and rightfully so. They're going to stand behind their quarterback. He definitely had, at Auburn when I saw him play, he's a limited quarterback, but when you get in that New England system, those guys tend to thrive because they're able to kind of manufacture it around their skill set. So you kind of saw him last preseason really thrive, but when you really look at his body of work, he does have some limitations. I kind of question whether or not he can be a long-term starter in the NFL.
We're talking with, of course, Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL. Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. The other day, Pro Football Focus put out ranked its rosters, had the Eagles number 9 overall in the NFL. Now, when I tell you number 9 overall, surprised, about right, too high, too low, because I was like, number 9, like a top 10 team in the league. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, top 10, that's a little bit, I wasn't really expecting that. I was thinking maybe, just outside of it at 11 or 12. I really like the Eagles roster. I think they've assembled a team that's going to certainly be a playoff contender. But there's certain areas there, as we've kind of outlined over the past few weeks, at defensive end, at cornerback, and at wide receiver. You've made wholesale changes in those areas to get that speed at the wide receiver position and get that elite shutdown corner that the defense so badly needed. But now you got to have it all come together. We've seen teams that look like they're going to be bulletproof throughout the whole season, and for one reason or another, things kind of start to snowball and injuries pile up and things like that. But if everything comes to if everything plays out the way that we're all anticipating it, Deshaun Jackson staying healthy for the vast majority of the season, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside taking that next step, Dallas Goedert really, cementing himself as a top 10 tight end, and Miles Sanders kind of getting kind of announcing himself to be a top 10 running back. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball and you get that elite shutdown corner, and you hope that Darius Slay kind of rebound from last season. And then you have, Sidney Jones in a perfect world. He's going to step and seize that second cornerback role and the different safety positions different safeties that they've added in the offseason. They can kind of all do a myriad of different things. They all have different strengths. So if they all are able to play their strong suit, I can definitely see it being a top 10 roster.
All right. So one of the biggest strength that they mentioned why this team is a top 10 roster was that they are one of the strongest teams in the NFL in the trenches. Do you concur when you look at the offensive line who lost Jason Peters? We're not sure what's happening at right guard. Now, remember, the right guard spot, we talked about Friday with Matt Pryor. We're not sure if he's going to be the guy, but it seems that they have 2 pretty big question marks on that offensive line. So even though they had one of the best offense, in fact, they had the highest graded offensive line last season, and also that defensive line, which ranked 4th last year.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider that to be a strength right now after what's kind of transpired over the past couple of weeks. I think that they have, on the defensive side, in the defensive trenches, they have a very formidable unit. But on the offensive side, like you said, there's a lot of questions there with Matt Pryor, who I do like. As we kind of talked about on Friday, he does some things that I really like and kind of project him to be, a long-term starter in the future. But there's questions there. Yeah, he's only played 79 snaps in the NFL, so it's kind of hard to base a solid opinion off those limited snaps. Like you said, you got Andre Dillard, who's going to be probably the primary question mark going into this season. How is he going to rebound? You heard that he gained weight but did he get stronger? Is it good weight? Has he taken? Is he playing with more confidence? Has he taken what he learned from last season and carried it over? And is it carrying over? So, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It's kind of hard to say that the trenches are a strong point for them, I would say on the defensive line, that's certainly a strength, but no longer on the offensive line.
Yeah, I like that defensive line. I'm very interested to see what Jim Schwartz does with Hargrave, Jackson, and Fletcher, how he kind of utilizes those three guys, because you could make an argument that those are three your best four guys on the entire line. Of course, Graham and Curry, Barnett. And what do you think about Curry? What are you feeling about Curry in terms of, we're getting about, a month away, and Curry still doesn't have a destination. Is he still in play to be back here?
Yeah, I remember over I guess it was a month or two ago, Jeff had reported that, he was dealing with the loss of his brother, and he was kind of mulling his options as far as teams he was going to play for. There were teams that were interested. Right now, there hasn't been a whole bunch of, news on that front, but, I anticipate him being one of those guys. I'm very surprised he's still out there, by the way, but I think he's going to be one of those veteran signings that you kind of see his name's going to start to surface when you get to August and the teams really figure out what they have on the defensive line, where they need to make their upgrades. And I think that, when you look at he's very productive. You saw what he did last year, and, playing, I believe it was like 36% of the defensive snaps he had a career season. So, I mean, he's ready to play. It's just a matter of, finding the right fit. And I think that you could potentially see the Eagles reach out to him later this summer.
Now, as far as the biggest concern, I felt this was an easy answer, right? Linebacker. It seems that everybody is looking at that's the most obvious. Sometimes the most obvious is, the easy answer here, but linebacker is the most obvious, and it's the easy answer. Is that your biggest concern still, and was it your biggest concern?
Yeah, I would say linebacker, but, they kind of find ways to work around that. They have in the past. It hasn't really been, a huge factor. I would say the back end, there's a lot of questions on that, particularly at the cornerback position. And when you look at, you have Darius Slay, and you have a lot of names behind him, but who's going to step up and take over that second role and really lock that down? I think that they would like for that to be Sidney Jones, so they can move Avonte Maddox around and you give him some looks at safety and the nickel and the like. But there's still questions there. Sidney Jones hasn't put a full offseason together since he's been drafted in 2017 for various reasons. But now it's kind of make break. So you got to see what you have in him. You hope that he can kind of take over that role. But there's a lot of question marks. Where does Crayvon LeBlanc fit? Rasul Douglas, and then with the safety position, I think that there's a lot of moving parts there. But how do they all fit? Do they have enough time to kind of get on the same page? Or is that going to be something that kind of rears its head, in the early parts of the season?
Hey, let's, one of the rookies, third-round pick. So sometimes when you think of a third-round pick, you're hoping and anticipating that player can help you. But Davion Taylor, the linebacker out of Colorado, expectations for him, because we're talking about maybe the weakest unit, maybe not only of the Eagles, one of the weaker units in football. Davion Taylor have a chance to make an impact. Do you see him in the mix?
I'm glad you mentioned Davion Taylor, because he's a player that somehow gets lost in the shuffle a little bit when you're kind of assessing the roster. They did invest a third-round pick in him, but I think that was more – he's going to be a factor in the future, if that makes sense, because I don't think that he's ready right now. He's still very raw. He played high school football, but he didn't play in any of the games. So he participated in all the practices, and he spent his first 2 years at junior college, and then really thrived on the big stage at Colorado. So he's still very raw in a lot of areas. He struggles finding the football, shedding blocks a little bit. He's more of a fast-flowing linebacker that gets to a place in a hurry, but doesn't necessarily always know where he's going. He just gets to wherever he's going very fast, if that makes sense. So I think that he really needs to refine some aspects of his game before the team can feel comfortable putting him in on defense. I think he will be a factor on special teams and probably one of the better players on that unit. And they really need somebody to step up in that area because, Nate Gary and TJ Edwards were two of their biggest contributors in that unit last year, and they're going to be starters. So there's going to be an opportunity for him to see the field, just probably not on defense right away.
Okay, and the other guy they mentioned in the article was Jatavius Brown. He was a starter in San Diego, and I don't know if he was in San Diego or L.A. He wasn't in L.A. He might have been when they were in San Diego because he did start there at one point. Right, so when he first got into the league, he was a starter. They may have still been in San Diego at that point. But once the last year or two, what was it about him that he lost that job, and is he a guy we're not talking enough about?
Yeah, Jatavius Brown, his career got off to to a pretty fast start. He was a mid-round pick from Akron. Akron's produced some linebackers in the past. USC's Gilbert with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have these undersized, fast linebackers that really flow sideline to sideline very fast. But, he's undersized. He's 5'11". I believe his best season was in 2018. I think he had just short of 100 tackles, if I'm not mistaken. But then injuries started to creep up, Mike, and then he started to have trouble, inconsistencies, with his tackling and certain, taking poor angles to the football and struggling to disengage from blocks. And, everything started to kind of compile, and, he kind of got overshadowed by, other players that they had. And, he became pretty much relegated to special teams, where he played, I believe, 51% of the snaps last season for the Chargers. So, but you're getting a veteran player. He's 26 years old. He's done it before. He's played at a high level. I think that he's kind of getting lost when you look at the linebackers. I think he can be that, possibly that third linebacker. I think will be in contention with Duke Riley for one of those roles there. But when you really look at it, at the Eagles linebackers, they don't have a ton of veteran experience. And I think that Jatavis Brown gives them that. And you don't really have a ton of room to get rid of guys. I think they only have 8 linebackers currently on the roster. So him being your most experienced linebacker and playing at a high level before, I think he's a pretty safe pick to stay on the roster.
Yeah, he was in San Diego, by the way, in 2016. 17, they moved to L.A., and he had 95 tackles in 2018. He went from this stat's unbelievable. He went from 95 tackles in 12, 1 year to 9, right?
9. Yeah.
So he had a massive drop-off in production or usage. Even if, I think you said he played like 50% of the snaps, they only have 9. I mean, he had a huge drop-off from 1 year to the next. But obviously, we're all concerned about.
He played 50% of the snaps on special teams because he kind of got he wasn't really a factor on defense anymore.
Jeez. So we'll see. X Factor. Now, it's funny that they mentioned the X Factor as Darius Slay, and their reasoning is that he did not grade out, for him. It was one of his worst graded years by Pro Football Focus. But if he plays to his normal grades, they feel that Slay could really be a game changer in the defense. And I feel like we've talked about him a little bit, but, a couple weeks ago, he wasn't included I guess it was last Tuesday when you were on with us, he wasn't included in the top 10 corners in the league. Last year, he didn't grade out all that well. But, he could – I'm interested to see how having that number 1 corner changes Jim Schwartz's defense.
Yeah, well, now it's left up to speculation because we really haven't seen Jim Schwartz as an Eagles defensive coordinator with a shutdown corner. So it's going to be, like you said, very interesting to see what he can do. I think he may be a little bit more aggressive with his blitzing, take a little bit more liberties on the back end, knowing that you have that guy that can shadow and eliminate the top receiver. But I would also say that another X factor that a lot of people have kind of overlooked this offseason is Nickel Roby-Coleman, who's an elite nickel corner, probably a top 5 nickel corner. And if you can have a guy that can step into that role, like a Rod Hood, and let other guys, if you can just hold that down and let other guys do their thing on the outside, and you have Darius Slay at one corner position, you really make it a lot easier for Jim Schwartz to kind of get his players out there and deploy them creatively. So I think that he's another X factor as well.
All right. Now, today on Twitter, there was a CBS ranking of the head coaches that has everybody up in arms, that Doug Pederson was so low on the list. Now, he finished in the top 10, but the one name that he was behind was Sean McVay, that a lot of people are just scratching their heads. And one of the reasons is, the Eagles have won a Super Bowl. McVay hasn't. The Eagles have not only won the Super Bowl, they did so in a year that they beat the Rams and then beat them again. So Pederson has had McVay's number. Did you take issue with Pederson being so low on that list?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think he's a better coach than Sean McVay. He's won the head-to-head matchup.
I feel
them.
that the Sean McVay shine kind of wore off a little bit. Like it was like he was getting,
It definitely did. It certainly seems like teams figured him out a little bit. Like you said, the shine kind of wore off. He kind of took the league by storm with some of the things and some of the concepts that he was doing and the packages that he had. And now you're starting to see whether it's Jared Goff getting a little bit exposed for the quarterback for his limitations, or Sean McVay getting exposed for his limitations. I don't know how you can put him in front of a Super Bowl winning head coach that, aside from 2016, when he really kind of when Doug Pederson has some head-scratching calls, he really has assembled, quality football teams. The players largely play very disciplined style football. That there's a sense of togetherness there. He's really has he's a stable head coach. He's and I really don't know how you can justify putting a guy like Sean McVay over him or Kyle Shanahan for that reason. Kyle Shanahan, you can make a little bit more of a case for, but I don't know that he's there yet. Right? I think he's done some great things to get mentioned in that conversation, but I don't know how you can put him in front of a Super Bowl winning head coach.
Yeah, I mean, Shanahan, they went to the Super Bowl last year, should be commended, did a great job, but Pederson has been to the playoffs 3 times, won a Super Bowl. To suggest that a guy who's done it for 2 years and one of them, yes, I get it, went to the Super Bowl, so he's 2 years on the side. I mean, really had 1 year where he has a winning season that would be that seems to be now this is top 10 for the 2020 season, not overall. So I guess this is foreshadowing a little bit that the 49ers and the Rams might be better than the Eagles.
I definitely don't think the Rams are better on paper right now than the Philadelphia Eagles. That much I'm sure of. The 49ers, yeah, they have a pretty strong defense. Jimmy Garoppolo is thriving in that system. They have a good running game of 3 running backs and kind of do different things. But I definitely wouldn't put the Rams over the Eagles by any stretch. And then also, who else is in there? I believe the Saints. Sean Payton was 4th, right?
You got Payton 4th. You got Shanahan. These are the NFC teams. Shanahan 5th, McVay 6th, Pete Carroll 8, Pederson 9, Zimmer 10. Yeah,
the one that I wouldn't put in front of him would be Sean McVay.
By the way, that's 6 NFC teams there, which means there's your 6 playoff teams, I would guess.
Yeah, going into the season. But we all know how seasons tend to kind of unravel in ways that we don't predict. So
absolutely. Also, when you go back to that whole list there, McVay. Look, I'm not trying to take shots at him nonstop here, but he went to the Super Bowl. They couldn't score. They were in the playoffs and couldn't score. The guy's supposed to be an offensive mind. Meanwhile, Pederson throws a 40 spot up on Belichick. Really, 41.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things that really stuck out to me with Sean McVay. It's like after that first season, it's like the league caught up to him, and he didn't necessarily evolve from. He didn't have a counter move for what the league was throwing at him. In response to his concept. So we really have to see what happens here. But like even their roster right now, as it's currently constructed, isn't a better roster than what Doug Pederson has to work with.
I think, what are we, about a month into before training camp, hopefully, by the way. I mean, I guess, no, we're still in June, so we got about a month before we get to training camp here. And before then, we talked about Vinny Curry here, but Jeff had mentioned on yesterday's show that we might start to see, teams start to sign, much like Cam Newton got signed. Is there any available guy out there still that you have an eye on, that you're still intrigued by where he might land?
Yeah, Everson Griffin. Everson Griffin's a player that he's played at a high level. He had some personal challenges off the field, but he's proven it before. He's healthy. I think that his asking price might be a little bit too rich for what teams are willing to spend, but he's another player that you could really see, factoring in once teams assess what they have at their pass rusher and their depth or injuries even. He's a guy that I thought that I would have, if I were the Eagles, I would have taken a shot on him, or definitely Vinny Curry. But once we get closer to training camp, as you were saying, teams will feel better about it because they can get them in there for a physical and really evaluate where they're at. So I think that's kind of why you haven't really seen much movement right now. But he's a guy that I'm kind of surprised that he's still out there given his body of work.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast for more Eagles conversation. And, of course, tomorrow, Jeff Mosher is back, Adam Kaplan on Thursday, Andrew on Friday. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Andrew, thanks a bunch, pal.
You got it. Take care.
Yeah, man. And he brought up a lot of great conversation there.